We want to head back now to the closely watched Virginia gubernatorial race. Elena Schneider joins us now. She's a national political reporter for Politico. Hi there, Elena. So polls closed a little over an hour ago. What is standing out to you about some of these early results?
Well, what's standing out to me is that this election looks like it's on track to once again break records. So back in 2017, when Governor Ralph Northam, a Democrat, was elected, they broke records. 2.6 million Virginians voted that year. Off elections are often really hard to animate people to participate, and it looks like this year is no different. Part of that is because the Virginia state legislature greatly expanded access to early voting and no excuse absentee voting. This sort of access to the ballot that Democrats have been pushing nationally, although failed to get anything done in Congress on it, but certainly have achieved in Virginia because they control the state legislature there. So we've seen an enormous jump in participation in early voting, and we're on track potentially to crack that record of maybe even 3 million people participating. But the open question is, who does that benefit? It's not clear that that necessarily benefits Democrats. And part of what we're seeing in the early returns, and still it's early, these smaller rural counties come in first, the larger urban counties come in later, but those rural counties have been surpassing their 2017, sometimes even 2020. So a presidential year performance showing that Youngkin, one of the key parts of him winning this election is by blowing it out in those southwestern Virginia smaller counties. And for him to do well, that's where he has to start. And we're seeing early signs of his success being able to do that.
And to that point, the exit poll data suggests that those in Virginia who strongly disapprove of President Biden's performance in office vastly outnumber those who strongly approve. And intensity on that axis is very important when it comes to a day like today, when people are counting votes and casting votes. So how is President Biden and his recent political difficulties factored in for Terry McAuliffe?
Well, look, I think it's unavoidable that Biden and his performance and his sort of, sagging approval ratings across the country, but in particular in Virginia, are being felt right now. And Democrats know that. There's sort of it's inevitable in that part of what happens in the White House, the party in power gets tied to whomever has that D or R next to their name. Republicans felt it during the Trump era. There was enormous backlash to Republicans in 2018. Democrats retook the House that year. And Democrats are in a lot of ways feeling that. And the depths to which Biden has sort of slipped here, I think is maybe even surprising Democrats just a touch too, that things have fallen quite as much as they have, that in a state where he won by 10 points just a year ago is now so close. And in fact, Youngkin has been leading in the polls of late. It's just, again, a sign that performance on a federal level can have a deep impact even on the state, and particularly in a state that is obviously part of sort of the D.C. suburbs, part of the D.C. larger area. Northern Virginia is closely tuned into what's happening on the Hill. And clearly we're seeing signs that Biden's unpopularity is translating to state races.
Elena, one of the things at the national level we continue to monitor is how people are feeling about various mandates, mask mandates, vask mandates. And we heard Terry McAuliffe talk early on about, the pandemic, obviously, and the way in which Republicans versus Democrats seem to be approaching that issue. But what are we learning now? What issues seem to be most important to voters in Virginia at this point?
So early exit polls have shown that the economy is still leading in the minds of voters. About a third of voters listed that as their primary reason or concern that they were voting on. Education comes close behind that. I think that could sort of vaccines, mask mandates could apply to both arguably the economy and to education. But I think on the education point, that's where this issue has come up the most, around masking, among masking public school children as they head back to school this fall. But look, I think COVID sort of hangs over a lot of this, as does those vaccine and mask mandates. Vaccine mandates being more popular than mask mandates. But it's sort of slipping in terms of being a top issue for a lot of voters because we're seeing the COVID numbers start to decline. Delta has sort of peaked and come down. And now people are more worried, as we can see in these early exit polls, focused on the economy, focused on inflation, prices going up at grocery stores, gas prices starting to creep up a little bit. So again, I think the economy is still very much sort of the larger, bigger picture issue that people are focused on, even though coronavirus and sort of vaccine mask mandates have been part of the conversation for the last 2 years, but maybe is not as top of mind.
Elena, if you had told Democrats 6 weeks ago that Terry McAuliffe could well lose the Virginia governor's race, I think they would have said to you and to me, well, that would be kind of an earthquake. That would be a very big deal. Democrats are trying to say, well, it's not such a big deal. There's a history, and maybe it's not so bad. It seems to me that if it was an earthquake 6 weeks ago, if it does happen, it will still be an earthquake, no matter how Democrats may try to characterize it in the moment. What's your sense of that?
I think you're absolutely right. No matter how they sort of try to spin it coming out of tonight and tomorrow morning, this is going to be a big deal. And what I'm really going to be watching is how much Glenn Youngkin is able to claw back voters in the suburbs. The suburban vote turned hard against Donald Trump in the Trump era. That is how Democrats were able to build their majorities in 2018 to win back the House. That's a key reason why Biden was able to win the White House in 2020 was support from suburban voters who turned hard against Republicans. And if Youngkin is able to win those back, that sets off huge warning signs for Democrats. And, speaking to a Democrat just a few weeks ago who said this, if we're hemorrhaging in the suburbs in Virginia now, we're going to be in an absolute bloodbath come 2022. So they're even maybe not so publicly aware, willing to sort of admit this. They know this privately, that they're facing really stiff political headwinds as they head into 2022.
Elena Schneider, national political reporter with Politico. We thank you very much.